So this is my favorite quote of Tony, from Tony. If I'm an advocate for anything, it's to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean, or simply across the river. Walk in someone else's shoes, or at least eat their food. It's a plus for everybody.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the voice to have.
Books really saved my life.
Bourdain entered my life many years ago, 1999, when I came across the New Yorker piece, like many people in this room, essentially, pulling the blinds aside and kind of exposing the secret happenings of the kitchen and this idea of why you shouldn't eat fish on Mondays. Over the years, I'd followed his career quickly. I was very young. I was coming out of a career in IT at the time. I wasn't in food. But I followed his career, followed the Cook's Tour show, and then the Travel Channel show, No Reservations, where I came across this blog that he had on the Travel Channel. And it was just like a behind-the-scenes blog that he would put up, a post that he would put up while he was filming, whether it was in Namibia or in Jamaica or wherever it was. And I really was hooked on his unique way of storytelling. This idea of just it being really raw and something very refreshing to compared to what you'd see on the Food Network. And I've followed his career since then, obviously, and I've met him on a number of occasions. And to see how it has evolved into the show On Parts and Unknown with this show that's kind of about food, but not really about food. It's about people, and it's about this idea of people in music and culture and politics. And I wanted to kind of go back to the first times you had met Bourdain. Gabrielle, I know that with your restaurant, The Prune in East Village, which is now 20 years old?
In October, will be 20.
Yeah, and you've known Bourdain for just as long. Can you talk a little bit about maybe one of your first encounters with Anthony?
Sure. We got pretty drunk at Siberia Bar, and it ended with smashing beer bottles against the brick wall at the end of the bar. And it was a revelation.
Yeah.
It's very hard to break a full bottle of beer.
Right, yeah.
It's easier when they're empty.
Did you share a meal together?
The first thing I learned from Anthony. May I pour you some water?
So Joel, I know you've worked with Bourdain on a number of graphic novels, Get Jiro, the sequel to that, and Hungry Ghost, which is now out. But I recently learned that you've actually known each other for quite some time, going back to the early 80s. And there's this cool story about Bourdain dropping off a manuscript at your doorstep.
I had this little magazine called Between C and D. In 1981, I got my first book contract, and I bought a computer. It was the first home computer. It was an Epson QX10, and it came out.
Model, yeah.
It produced dot matrix on a thing, and I realized I had a printing press, so I
Back when polio was still...
Yeah, really. But the next thing I knew, I got a comic in the mail from, I don't know, from somebody. And I wrote back that your drawing sucks, but your writing's pretty good. And like about a week later, I was upstairs. I lived in a tenement apartment on the 4th floor in the East Village, and somebody rang my buzzer, and I went downstairs, and there was this very tall guy in chef whites, fucking high out of his mind. And I brought him upstairs, and we sat for about 4 hours at my kitchen table just talking. My dad was a waiter at the stage in the Carnegie. My brother, who's right there. We grew up in the restaurant business. I worked my way through graduate school, working in, I like to say every restaurant in New York, but not quite, but a lot of restaurants. And we just hit it off. He was so insecure. He was so unsure of himself. And I worked with him a lot over the years, but he was a natural writer from the get-go. He was a genuine talent, and the person that you see on TV, that's who he was. He was caring and expansive in every way. And for me, who worked with him on many, many, many projects together, he was the best partner. And I miss him terribly. His spirit was, it's with me right now. You know, he's with me all the time.
What was he like in person, Gabrielle, when you spent some time with Bourdain?
What is Tony like in person?
Yeah.
He's very early for every event.
Yeah.
He would sit in that green room 30 more minutes than we just did.
Yeah, okay.
To be sure, he's the first one there. You know, he's awkward. He's a little awkward.
He used to come to the pool quite a
Nervous.
bit, right?
Say again?
He used to eat at the restaurant quite a bit.
He ate at prune frequently. It was, I think, his kind of joint. When he came the first time, he was excited to see this dish of Fergus Henderson's that I was totally plagiarizing with Fergus's permission, the roasted bone marrow. And I think Tony loved, as you know, the esoteric and the little known. So he was like, why would you have these marrow bones? How do you know this guy, who is now very famous? But what was he like in person? He was like he was on camera, but also not very, nervous. He had social anxiety, I think. And
His work, whether it was from the novels or whether it was from the TV shows, reached a lot of people, millions of people across the world, cross-generational, people of all backgrounds and shapes and sizes, colors, or whatever. Why do you think his work was so appealing? What was so appealing about what he was doing? Like, maybe you can talk about just his writing and what appealed to you in those early days.
His energy, how genuine it was. He was a seeker. He was interested in all kinds of people in a very visceral way. I also really appreciated that he was so dedicated to the kitchen and so dreaded it at the same time. You know, when I met him, he was still, a young man, and he was already thinking about, I don't want to be trapped on the line. He felt as exhilarated as he was that it was not a place that he wanted to be as he aged.
yeah, as your knees start to crack when you step on the line and you go up and down the stairs to the basement prep kitchen for your 9,000th visit as you're hitting your 50s, like that is not a prospect you want to face
He did not
without
want to
health care, without a good income.
Yeah.
But his love of the work when he could still do it was so contagious, and I think that's what people are drawn to. He was in love with the work, with the pirate ship, with the pirates.
It's
and
true.
And he made it so attractive. Ironically, if you will, he made the pirate ship attractive to non-pirates.
Right.
And so you get a lot of very hygienic people now wanting to work in this industry. It's like,
Right.
wait, there's no more scallywag, there's no more, his pirate ship that he loved so much.
And so you worked in the industry as well, but you were front of house, right? I think you.
I was.
Yeah.
I worked as a waiter. I worked as a busboy. I worked as a dishwasher. I worked as a waiter.
But never together with Tony.
No, I never worked with Tony.
But you spent some time eating. I think you famously said that you've eaten in.
I ate it in every kitchen that he ever worked at. From when I met him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony's work for me has evolved, as I said, had evolved between the TLC shows and the Parts Unknown shows. I've always resonated with anything that he did in Southeast Asia because it's just a personal connection for me. Are there any bodies of work that you guys have enjoyed over the years that he has produced? Gabrielle?
Well, I feel like Tony wrote the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance for all time of line cooks the world over. I don't watch a lot of television. Of course, I've seen him in every airport when I'm in the airport, but I come to him through his book, his first book, Kitchen Confidential, and nasty bits too. His writing was so fantastic and so right. He managed this thing that I think food writers find very difficult, which is to revere and honor the craft of writing and also get the food in there and the work, but not, it's a real balance getting the, not, oh, it's just about food, so I don't really have to be a good writer, or I can load up this poor little, plate of food writing with like huge meaning, too much freight. I think he got it just right. But the first book, Kitchen Confidential, it did what had not been done. It opened up that door to the back of house that no one had ever seen. And as he said, he could not travel the world ever again without the door pushing open and the fluorescent lights from the kitchen spilling out and the line cooks all looking at him and sending him a treat, a snack, buying him a drink. He revered the crew.
Right, yeah. Joel, where are you?
No,
Is there a piece of work like between Jiro and the sequel and Hungry Ghost? Is there a body of work maybe you've worked on together that you've enjoyed the most that stands out?
Working with Tony over the years, Kitchen Confidential came from an email that he sent me. He was sent by Leal. Leal was opening a branch in Tokyo, and he went for the first time, and he wrote me an email from his hotel room looking out over Tokyo, and it was hilarious. And I took it out of the computer, and I went into the living room. My wife, who's a publisher, Karen Rinaldi, had just had our son, and she was sitting on the floor in the living room breastfeeding the baby, and I said, "Karen, you have to read this from Tony." And she said, "Joel, get away from me. Can't you see what I'm doing? I'm feeding the baby." So I read it to her, and it was so funny and so good. And she called up his agent and made an offer, and it became Kitchen Confidential. Once Tony got free, once he just allowed himself to write without anxiety, he always had anxiety, but once he let it start to flow, his voice came out. Like I said, he was always a really good writer, but once he got over that, and then our relationship was like the perfect relationship as far as writers go, because we would both just do what we did, and as soon as we hit a wall, we would just send it to the other person, and especially Tony would just go, and then it would come back to me, and it was scattershot, but there was such brilliance in it, and you could just pick it out. That's all I did. I just picked it out and just added it, and we had a ball with both Get Jiro and Hungry Ghosts.
Yeah, because I guess when you were working on the graphic novel, he was traveling obviously extensively.
Always traveling.
So your communication in terms of that the
Always
workflow
email.
was email.
Yeah. I mean, we would meet when he was in town, but he was in town so infrequently. He was on the road, 270 days a year.
Yeah. You made a comment about how great of a writer he was, and there are so many quotes that you can pull from Bourdain's work. I mean, Eater regularly ran a series where they did a quotable Bourdain post every time the show aired. I just want to pull one up. So he said, "You learn a lot about someone when you share a meal together." And I wanted to ask the two of you if you can tell us a story about some of your meals together over the years. Gabrielle, please.
It's so funny because he got so. I'm thinking about that chapter in Kitchen Confidential in the beginning, in the end, where he discusses the level of discourse, and that for 20 years, over 20 years, he's just been hanging out with cooks, trying to figure out new ways to say, "You're a dick," or in any language that was out of hand, and or dropping the F-bomb. And it's so funny how he has. He really honed his skill with words.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was
in the
brilliant at
kitchen.
that. Yeah. Is there a story you'd want to share, Joel, about maybe one of your meals together over the years?
My last meal with Tony was a perfect meal. We were at his apartment, and his daughter was hungry, so we went out to Gray's Papaya, a hot dog stand, and that was my last meal with Tony.
I think that's the beauty of Bourdain's work, is that he would eat all ends of the spectrum, right? Highbrow, and like you'd not be afraid to eat at the Jollibee in the Philippines and have bowls of spaghetti with fried chicken on top of it. That was very
Totally.
appealing to me.
He can enjoy any. If any of our moms were cooking, that would be his favorite meal.
To go to a mom's house, yeah.
Yeah, that was his favorite. But he loved everything. He loved to eat, and he changed after Lebanon, after Beirut. Before that, I think he was much more focused on food, and he loved that, and he loved sharing food. But after Beirut, he became much more involved with people and their struggles.
And weaving in the stories of the people and possibly
It transformed him, and I think it made him so, not that he wasn't before, because he was, but it made him so soulful, and he had good intent towards people, to all kinds of people, and his inroad was through food, certainly, but it was through every time. I never saw him ever when he wasn't gracious to people, strangers, anyone. He was always just absolutely gracious and giving of himself in such a remarkable way. I always admired him for his spirit and his heart.
It's that generosity. He does the work so passionately that you don't even know he's working so hard. And it's so attractive. Again, the television, the travel, you know how many people want to be Tony Bourdain? Like, man, you've got the job, man.
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
is the life.
Yeah.
And what you don't see is that actually it's like 228 days a year in a hotel room.
Yeah.
And you're never home. And all you see is the
finished product.
That's right.
Right.
His passion for the people, not the work that he had to do.
Yeah.
To show it to share it with you. It's very generous. And receding, right? That's a real Tony move. He'll buy dinner and leave before you have a chance to realize that he picked up the check, and you're like, fuck. He just paid.
He also made himself quite accessible to everyone, especially in the industry. I mean, there's a reputation that he had a reputation where he constantly was able to lend an ear or an eye or help to any writer, any aspiring writer in the industry. He was always approachable in person or via communication. When you were working on your memoir, I guess 10 years ago now, when it came out, did you collaborate with him? What was that process like? Did you ever work with him when you were writing it?
Certainly not.
Yeah.
I had a lot of the questions were, do you want to be the female Tony Bourdain? And because I was writing a memoir, is it going to be the female Kitchen Confidential? And I argued with Kitchen Confidential as well. As much as it was the anthem of our people, I also, when I read that book, thought, oh, dude, it's not always like this. It's not all drugs and sex and running guns and working for the mafia. It's like there are some very quiet moments, and there isn't a fire every day. And in fact, I was almost counter. I was like, I think I'd like to write a truer.
Yeah.
Not a truer, but as true, but like sort of if you look up and see the whole week, not just the day when everything's on fire and everyone's.
And I mean, is that a testament to how the industry has evolved in that time period? I mean, it would have been a decade between Kitchen Confidential and your memoir, right?
I don't think that the kitchen had evolved. I grew up in the same kitchens that he grew up in. It's, Tony loved the pirate ship. I can't emphasize it enough. He was desperate to be a pirate, this boy from New Jersey with loving parents, with a good education, and he wanted to be badass. He wanted to, as he admired so much, he's like, this is the work, this milieu, this is where This is for people who are either on their way to prison or on their way out.
Out, okay, right.
And that was fascinating to him, and that's exactly our differences, right? I think
Yeah.
we often share a fan base sometimes until we meet each other's fans, and then we're like, actually, no. Like, he wanted to be badass, and I'm always trying to not say fuck, or to always
Right, yeah.
clean it up
Yeah.
and to get out of juvie.
And I guess he was using the graphic novel as a conduit to get some of that.
Totally. I mean, when you say you always want to be a pirate, when he used to tell me this story when he was at Vassar. He went to school before he went to CIA, and he would walk around campus with a sword, and everybody thought he was like completely out of his mind.
Right, he was the dick with nunchucks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Walking around campus.
You can still find those photos if you Google them online. Yeah.
So when we were doing comic books together, that was his dream. He was living his dream. He loved samurai, Japanese samurai movies and gangster yakuza movies. He just, he was there. He was so thrilled with himself.
So I remember June 8th of last year quite. It's still very fresh for me. We woke up in the morning, my wife and I, we have, the first 10 minutes of our morning is usually we just sit on the couch, we don't talk, we just catch up on our tweets and Instagrams and emails and whatnot. Pretty embarrassing. But then I remember, I had seen a tweet, I had seen the tweet from the CNN account, and immediately my phone fell to the floor and I said, oh honey, turn on the TV right away. And we tuned into CNN and we just kind of, our day just, got worse and worse and worse. And the whole range of emotions just lasted for what's felt like days and weeks. And I never really had a personal relationship with Bourdain. What was your day like that day? Can you tell me about what you were feeling when you heard the news?
Yes. It's actually, sure. I just will say that the first thing that I saw was a Instagram post by a colleague, and it started immediately. There were no pictures it wasn't just Tony, it was me and Tony, and look at my proximity to Tony. And I felt gutted by this. I found it almost grotesque, or some kind of an obscenity, this kind of grab for, I want to show you that he was special to me the most. And I found it a day to not publish, I guess. I was like, this is a day to shut the fuck up. And shut up and lie down and bawl your brains out and not immediately self-publish, look at me. And that's where I was, dropping my kid off at school and heard it from a shock jock on the radio and just did not talk for, until today.
My phone rang at 5 in the morning. And we had the same agent, and she said, Tony passed. My wife actually had picked up the phone, and Karen said to me, Tony's gone, and I said, Tony who? It didn't compute, and then our phone just didn't stop that day, and I couldn't believe it, and then I could believe it at the same time. But I had just talked to him the day before, and I just was like, whatever. You think could I have helped? Could I have done something? Should I have seen? And I think the answer is no. I mean, Karen and I talked about it. Enough. She had interviewed him just a couple of weeks before, and she said that that he was depressed, and I guess my ego or my own self-involvement didn't let me see well enough or something. I don't even know. I don't know.
And you were in the middle of still working on projects with
We,
them.
we had just written the dedication for our last book together. Just like I said, the day before, we had just written it, and I don't know.
What's the last year been like for you in terms of with Hungry Ghosts, and seeing that come to fruition?
Well, I know that he loved the book. The book is so beautiful, and I know he was really proud of it and had really enjoyed working on it, and that gives me comfort. And I'm still working on it. Sony had bought it for TV anime, and I'm doing it now, and I'm with him. He's with me. I'm still, he's still yelling at me, and I'm still yelling at him. I mean, it's just, I don't know. He was
Good to argue with.
Yeah, he was good to argue with. He was very, he was ready for it.
When you read Hungry Ghosts, you can't help but read it in his voice, obviously, from the front to back, and his style is right there from beginning to end, with the peppering of the food elements throughout the book. I really enjoyed it, and the artwork with all the illustrators are also quite wonderful. I have one more quote that I want to go back to, and this is a good one.
Wait, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember if you were there. There was a memorial for him, and there were all
So
these.
awkward.
What?
It was awkward.
Yeah, but it was also not. But some.
You mean the one in front of Lay Hall?
No,
No,
there
it
was
was
a
sort of a private
private
thing.
thing.
But with a lot of people from his life. And this kid came up to me. He was a man. Came up to me who had been to high school with Tony, and he had Tony's sketchbook. And
Wow.
he pulled it out, and it was the same shitty drawings that he had sent me. It made me feel so good.
So this is my favorite quote of Tony, from Tony. If I'm an advocate for anything, it's to move as far as you can, as much as you can, across the ocean, or simply across the river. Walk in someone else's shoes, or at least eat their food. It's a plus for everybody. Gabrielle, I know you've traveled extensively in the past, where you've worked through Greece and Turkey. Looking back to your friendship with Bourdain, did he inspire you to travel anywhere, or travel in a particular way?
No.
Okay. Like maybe a place in Southeast Asia?
No,
or...
I mean, I love this dude. I love the dude, but he was not an inspiration or
Okay.
I think we were kindred. I think we liked each other because we already traveled in the similar way and already wrote and already had sort of candor and frankness, and so no,
Okay.
I was already on that
Joe, what
path.
about you? I think you mentioned Vietnam briefly backstage.
Well, I haven't been to Vietnam, but my brother just came back, and I think, that I inspired him to go because Tony loved Vietnam so much. But Tony was like my little brother. I mean, he was taller than me, but he was like my little brother, and I paid attention to, he certainly inspired me to go visit Japan, and oh my God, he turned me on to so many movies and books, and he was just, he was so encyclopedic about the things that he loved, and he just made me want to watch 12 hours of samurai movies in a row, until my eyeballs fell out.
I think that's the inspiration. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is where he says, "Your body is not a temple. Your body is an adventure."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go eat
Yeah, that's a good
everywhere.
one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.